The envelope was still warm. Adrian Shepard stared at it, crumpled white paper with a hospital logo that made his stomach drop, and realized he'd just made the worst mistake of his life. 60 seconds ago, he'd fired her.
Elena Rigby.
The maid who'd been late 3 times. 3 strikes, his rule, non-negotiable. He delivered the news with surgical precision, watched her face crumble, watched tears stream down hollow cheeks as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mr. Shepard," in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. She'd left. Elevator doors closed.
Gone.
And now this letter lay on his marble floor where it had slipped from her trembling hands. Bellevue Hospital Center. Pediatric Oncology Department. His hand shook as he pulled out the paper. Stage 4 neuroblastoma. Patient: Michael Rigby, age 7. Metastasized. Aggressive protocol required. ICU monitoring. 7 years old. The dates: 3 weeks ago. Right when the lateness started. Adrian's brilliant mind, the one that had built a $40 billion empire, began calculating with horrible clarity. The dark circles under her eyes. Her hand shaking when she cleaned. That day he'd found her crying by the window, and she'd said, "Personal problems won't affect my work." But it had affected her work. Because she'd been spending nights in a pediatric ICU watching her son die. And he'd fired her for it. "No," Adrian whispered to the empty penthouse.
His phone buzzed.
Board meeting in 45 minutes. The world spinning forward, efficient and cold, exactly how he'd built it. But something was breaking inside his chest, something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. He looked at the elevator, at the letter, at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. 58 floors up, Manhattan sprawling below like a kingdom. And suddenly Adrian Shepard, billionaire, genius, the man who never made mistakes, was running. Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome back. If your heart is already racing, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from, because this story is about to take you on a journey that'll wreck you and rebuild you all at once. How are you doing today? I mean, really? Take a second.
Breathe.
You're exactly where you need to be. And if you haven't subscribed yet, smash that button now, because what Adrian discovers next will shatter everything you think you know about second chances and redemption. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when a man who's lost his humanity finds it in the most devastating way possible. Now, let's go. He caught the elevator on the 43rd floor. The doors opened and there she was, Elena Rigby, small and broken, clutching a canvas bag like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes were red, swollen, staring at nothing. She looked up, saw him,
Froze.
"Mr. Shepard. Your son." His voice came out raw, desperate. "Michael. The hospital. I found." He held up the letter and watched her face go white. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena's lips trembled. "You have rules. 3 strikes. I knew. I thought if I just worked harder, faster, if I could just..." Her voice broke. "I needed this job. The insurance. The bills. I thought I could do both. Be there for him at night and work for you during the day. I thought." "How long has he been sick?" 6 months. Diagnosed 3 weeks ago." She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "Stage 4. They say we're running out of time." The elevator started moving again, descending, and Adrian felt like he was falling with it. 6 months. She'd been carrying this alone for 6 months. Working for him. Cleaning his penthouse. Making his coffee. Organizing his life. While hers was disintegrating. And he'd never noticed. "I'm taking you back to the hospital," Adrian said. "Mr. Shepard.
Now.
We're going now." His mind was already moving, calculating, the way it did when he solved impossible problems. But this wasn't business. This was something else entirely, something terrifying and unfamiliar that made his carefully constructed world feel paper-thin. "Which hospital?" "Bellevue." Elena nodded, tears streaming again. "But I don't understand." "Neither do I." Adrian hit the button for the parking garage, his hand steady even though everything inside him was chaos. "But I'm about to figure it out." The elevator descended through his tower of steel and glass, carrying a billionaire and the woman he destroyed, racing toward a truth that would change everything. Outside, Manhattan waited, indifferent and vast. Inside, Adrian Shepard felt the first crack in the armor he'd spent 38 years building. And he knew, with a certainty that had made him billions, that nothing would ever be the same. The Bentley cut through Manhattan traffic like a knife through water. Adrian drove in silence, hands gripping the wheel with white-knuckled intensity, while Elena sat frozen in the passenger seat, her canvas bag clutched to her chest like a shield. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the tower. Hadn't asked why. Hadn't questioned the sudden reversal that made no logical sense. She just stared straight ahead, and Adrian recognized that look.
Shock.
Survival mode. The face of someone who'd been running on empty for so long they'd forgotten what rest felt like. He knew because he'd worn that same expression once. 20 years ago. Different circumstances. Same hollow eyes. Tell me about him, Adrian said quietly. Elena flinched, as if she'd forgotten he was there. Sir? Michael. Your son. Tell me about him. Her hands tightened on the bag. For a moment, Adrian thought she wouldn't answer. Then, so softly, he almost missed it. He wants to be an astronaut. Something twisted in Adrian's chest. He has posters all over his hospital room. Stars. Planets. The Mars rover. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. He asks the nurses which constellations are visible each night. Even when he's too sick to sit up, he asks. Like, if he learns enough, maps enough of the universe, he'll find a way to… Her voice cracked. To stay in it. Adrian's jaw clenched. 7 years old and already facing mortality, with more courage than most adults managed in a lifetime. Planning for futures he might never see. Dreaming of stars he might never reach. How long have you worked for me? Adrian asked. 3 years. Since he was 4. 3 years. Over 1,000 days of her life spent making his comfortable, while hers fell apart in slow motion. You never mentioned him. Not once. Elena's laugh was bitter. You never asked, Mr. Shepard. And I needed the job too much to risk seeming distracted, uncommitted. She looked at him then, really looked, and Adrian saw something sharp beneath the exhaustion. You hired me because I was invisible, efficient, because I never made you acknowledge I existed outside of what I could do for you. The words landed like punches. Because she was right. Adrian Shepard had built his empire on emotional distance. Clean transactions. No mess, no complications, no human unpredictability. His penthouse reflected it. Perfect lines, steel and glass, everything in its place. Beautiful and cold as a mausoleum. He designed his entire life that way. After.
No. He wouldn't think about that. Not now.
The insurance through my company, Adrian said, voice tight. It should cover. It covers some. Not enough. Not for experimental treatments. Not for the clinical trial his doctors recommended. Elena's hands were shaking again. I've been taking extra shifts, cleaning offices at night after leaving your place. Weekends. Every spare hour. But it's not. There's never enough, and the bills keep coming, and Michael keeps asking when he can go home, and I don't know how to tell him that. She broke off, pressing her palm to her mouth, shoulders heaving with silent sobs. Adrian pulled the car over. They were blocks from Bellevue now, the hospital rising in the distance like a fortress of desperation and hope. Around them, the city moved, people rushing to meetings, to lunches, to lives that continued spinning forward while others stood still in ICU waiting rooms.
I'm sorry, Elena whispered.
I shouldn't, you don't need to hear this. I don't know why you're even. I had a daughter. The words came out before Adrian could stop them. Elena's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. Adrian stared at the steering wheel, his reflection distorted in the polished wood. He never talked about this. Never. Not to business partners, not to the rotating parade of women who briefly warmed his bed, not to anyone. But something about this moment, this desperate drive through city streets with a woman whose life he'd casually destroyed, demanded truth. Lily, he continued, Voice rough. She was 5. Brain aneurysm. No warning. 1 minute she was drawing pictures of princesses at the kitchen table. The next he stopped.
Breathed.
It was 20 years ago. I was building my first company, working 100-hour weeks. My wife begged me to slow down, spend time with Lily, be present. I said after this deal. After this launch. After. His throat closed. The aneurysm happened while I was in Tokyo closing an acquisition. I got the call at 2 a.m. Flew home. But I was too late. She was already. He couldn't say the word. My wife left 6 months later. Said living with me was like living with a ghost. She was right. Elena was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. I swore I'd never feel that way again, Adrian said. So I built walls. Made everything about business. Numbers. Efficiency. Things I could control. People became transactions. Complications became problems to eliminate. I thought, he laughed bitterly. I thought if I kept everything clean and distant, it wouldn't hurt. Nothing could touch me. He looked at Elena then, really looked at her for the first time since she'd started working for him 3 years ago. Saw the pain etched into every line of her face. The exhaustion that went bone deep. The fierce, desperate love of a mother fighting impossible odds. Saw himself, 20 years ago, standing in a hospital corridor while his world ended. I can't bring Lily back, Adrian said quietly. But maybe I can help you keep Michael. Elena's eyes widened. Mr. Shepard, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He put the car back in gear. Now, let's go meet your son. They walked through Bellevue's automatic doors into the familiar smell of antiseptic and fear. Adrian had been in hospitals exactly twice since Lily died. Both times for board members' emergencies. Both times he'd felt the walls closing in, the memories crushing his chest until he couldn't breathe. But Elena was already moving, navigating corridors with practiced efficiency, and Adrian followed. The Pediatric Oncology ward hit him like a wall. Children. Everywhere. Bald from chemo. Hooked to IVs. Some laughing with visitors. Some sleeping fitfully. Some staring at tablets with hollow eyes that had seen too much too soon. He's in room 412, Elena whispered, and Adrian heard the shift in her voice. The way it softened, warmed, became something entirely different than the defeated woman in his penthouse. This was a mother approaching her child. She pushed open the door. The boy was tiny. That was Adrian's first thought. Michael Rigby was 7 but looked 5, his small body dwarfed by the hospital bed, his skin pale against the white sheets. And 4 snaked into his arm. Monitors beeped softly. And covering every available surface, the walls, the windowsill, the ceiling above his bed, were stars. Glow-in-the-dark constellations. Printed pictures of nebulas. Hand-drawn maps of solar systems. A child's desperate attempt to bring the universe into a room that smelled like death.
Manga.
Michael's face lit up like sunrise, and Adrian watched Elena transform. The exhaustion fell away. The defeat vanished. She rushed to the bed, careful of the tubes and wires, and gathered her son into her arms with a gentleness that made Adrian's chest ache. Baby, I'm here. I'm so sorry I'm late. It's okay, Mama. Nurse Sarah said you were working hard, so I can get better. Michael's voice was thin, weak, but his eyes were bright. Curious.
Alive.
He looked past Elena to Adrian, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Who's that? Elena turned, and Adrian saw the question in her eyes. How do I explain you? Adrian stepped forward, moving before he could overthink it. I'm Adrian, he said, crouching beside the bed, so he was eye level with Michael. I work with your mom, and I heard you want to be an astronaut. Michael's eyes went wide. You did. I did. So, I thought maybe you could tell me about it. Because Adrian paused, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. I think that's the coolest job in the world. Michael's grin was pure sunshine. And for the first time in 20 years, Adrian Shepard felt the ice around his heart begin to crack. If you're feeling the weight of this moment, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever gotten a second chance you didn't deserve? Because Adrian's about to discover that redemption is the hardest thing he's ever fought for. Michael talked about Mars for 20 minutes straight. Adrian listened to every word. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious despite the four in his arm, despite the way he had to pause to catch his breath, despite the shadows under his eyes that no 7-year-old should have. He described rovers and orbital mechanics with the same wonder most kids reserved for superheroes. And Perseverance found organic molecules, Michael said, his thin hands gesturing excitedly. Which means maybe there was life there once. Maybe there still is, underground where it's warmer. Maybe. A coughing fit cut him off. Elena was there instantly, holding him steady, rubbing his back. The monitors beeped faster. A nurse appeared in the doorway, assessed the situation with practiced eyes, then disappeared when Elena waved her off. This was routine. Normal. The new reality of their lives. When Michael caught his breath, his smile was apologetic.
The
medicine makes me cough sometimes. Don't apologize, Adrian said, his voice rougher than intended. Michael studied him with those two old eyes. Mama says apologizing shows you care. That even when things are hard, manners matter. Adrian glanced at Elena, saw the flush in her cheeks. Even in crisis, she'd been teaching her son grace. While Adrian had been firing her for being late. His phone vibrated. Board meeting starting. 15 missed calls. He silenced it without looking. Michael, Adrian said carefully. Your mom mentioned there's a clinical trial. One that might help. The boy's face fell. The doctor said it costs too much. That our insurance won't pay for experimental stuff. He looked at his mother. But Mama's working really hard. She says we'll figure it out. Elena's eyes glistened. Baby. What if I helped? Adrian interrupted. The room went silent except for the monitor's steady beeping. Elena stared at him. Mr. Shepard, you can't. Why not? Adrian pulled out his phone, fingers already moving across the screen. What's the name of the trial? Who's running it? Adrian. Elena's voice cracked on his first name, and he realized she'd never used it before. This isn't you don't owe us anything. You already, coming here was more than. Dr. Catherine Mitchell at Sloan Kettering, a weak voice said. They both turned to Michael, who was watching them with startling clarity. The trial is called NB Advanced Protocol, the boy continued. It uses modified T cells to target neuroblastoma tumors. Dr. Mitchell said I'm a perfect candidate, but it costs $200,000 and insurance won't cover experimental treatments. He recited it like he'd memorized every word. Mama cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping. She's trying to save the money, but there's not enough time. The clinical precision of his explanation shattered something in Adrian's chest. 7 years old, and already carrying the weight of his own mortality. Already understanding that money meant life, and the lack of it meant.
No.
Adrian stood abruptly. I need to make a call. He stepped into the hallway, Elena following quickly. Mr. Shepard, please. She grabbed his arm, and Adrian felt the tremor in her fingers. I can't let you do this. The money, it's too much, and I have nothing to offer in return, and I'm not asking for anything in return. Then why? Elena's voice rose, desperate and confused. Why would you help us? You fired me this morning. You don't know us. We're nothing to you. Adrian looked through the door's window at Michael, who was rearranging his star maps with careful precision despite his shaking hands. 20 years ago, I had everything, Adrian said quietly.
A daughter. A wife.
A future. And I lost it all because I was too busy building an empire to notice what mattered. He turned to Elena. You've been working for me for 3 years. Every day, you came into my home, made my life easier, asked for nothing. And I never once saw you as anything more than a function. His hands clenched. This morning, I fired you for being late, for having the audacity to prioritize your dying son over my morning coffee. I looked at you, at your tears, your desperation, and felt nothing except irritation that you were disrupting my schedule. Elena's breath hitched. I can't undo 20 years of being a coward, Adrian continued. Can't bring my daughter back. Can't fix my failed marriage. But maybe, his voice cracked. Maybe I can stop one more person from losing everything while I stand by and do nothing. Tears streamed down Elena's face. I don't understand you. Neither do I anymore. Adrian pulled out his phone. What's Dr. Mitchell's number? The call took 4 minutes. Dr. Catherine Mitchell was initially skeptical. Billionaires didn't typically phone about clinical trials on Sunday mornings. But Adrian was persuasive when he wanted to be, and he wanted this more than he'd wanted anything in years. Michael Rigby, he said. 7 years old. Stage 4 neuroblastoma. I'm told he's a candidate for your NB Advanced protocol. Papers rustled on the other end. Yes, I know Michael's case. Brilliant child. Ideal candidate. But the family's insurance. I'm covering the costs. All of them. Whatever the trial requires. Silence. Mr. Shepard, we're talking about $200,000 minimum. Possibly more depending on complications, extended treatment, hospitalization.
I'm aware.
Adrian watched through the window as Michael showed a nurse his drawings. When can he start? We need to run preliminary tests, blood work, ensure he's strong enough for the protocol. If everything clears, possibly within a week. Make it 3 days. Mr. Shepard. Dr. Mitchell, that child is running out of time. I'm offering you unlimited resources. Use them. His voice softened. Please. Another pause. Then, I'll make the calls. Have his mother bring him in tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. We'll fast-track everything. Adrian ended the call and turned to Elena. She was sliding down the wall, hands over her face, shoulders shaking with sobs that came from somewhere too deep for sound. Adrian crouched beside her, awkward and uncertain. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals with ice in his veins, but this, comforting another human's grief, was foreign territory.
Elena.
He might live, she whispered through her tears. My baby might actually live.
He will.
Adrian said it with the same certainty he used when promising investors returns. I'll make sure of it. Elena looked up at him with red, swollen eyes.
Why?
Please, I need to understand why you're doing this. Adrian thought about Lily's drawings, still in a box somewhere in his penthouse. About his ex-wife's final words, "You're so busy building monuments to yourself, you forgot how to be human." About the letter on his floor, and the moment he'd realized he'd become the villain in someone else's story. Because 20 years ago, someone should have done this for me, he said simply. And no one did. And I've been paying for it every day since. He stood, offering his hand. Elena took it, letting him pull her up. Through the window, Michael was laughing at something the nurse said, his thin face bright with joy that shouldn't be possible in a room that smelled like death. Tomorrow morning, Adrian said. 8 a.m. I'll have a car pick you both up. I don't know how to thank you. Don't. Adrian's jaw tightened. Just keep being his mother. That's all he needs. He walked toward the elevator, his entire world tilting on an axis he didn't recognize. Behind him, Elena called out. Adrian? He turned. Thank you, she said, for seeing us. Finally. Adrian nodded once and left before she could see the tears burning in his eyes. If this story is gripping you, drop a comment, tell me about second chances, and hit subscribe. The board meeting was a disaster. Adrian arrived 90 minutes late, tie loosened, hair disheveled, his mind still in a hospital room with glow-in-the-dark stars. The 12 executives around the conference table stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Where the hell have you been? Richard Corleone, his CFO, demanded. We've been waiting. Something came up. Adrian slid into his chair, not bothering with apologies. Something came up? Richard's face reddened. We're discussing the Nexus merger. $40 billion on the line. You don't just reschedule it. The room went silent. Excuse me? Richard's voice dropped dangerously low. Reschedule. The merger. All of it. Adrian looked around the table at the shocked faces. Push everything back 2 weeks. Adrian, have you lost your mind? Sarah Carpenter, his COO, leaned forward. The Nexus board is flying in from Singapore tomorrow. We've been negotiating for 6 months. You can't just. I can. I am. Adrian's phone buzzed, Dr. Mitchell confirming Michael's intake appointment. He typed a quick response, ignoring the stunned silence. 2 weeks. Make it work. Richard stood abruptly. What's going on with you? This isn't like you. Exactly, Adrian thought. That's the point. For 20 years, he'd been the machine. The cold, calculating genius who never let emotions interfere with business. Who saw humans as assets or liabilities. Who built empires on the graves of his own humanity. And this morning, it had all crumbled over a crumpled letter. I have personal matters to attend to, Adrian said simply. Personal matters? Richard laughed incredulously. You don't have personal matters. You barely have a personal life. The words hung in the air, brutal and true. Adrian stood, gathering his things. Meeting adjourned. Sarah, handle Nexus. Richard, you're in charge until I return. Don't call me unless the building's on fire. He left them staring, walked out of his own company, and for the first time in 2 decades, didn't look back. The next morning, Adrian's driver picked up Elena and Michael at 6 a.m. Adrian was already waiting at Sloan Kettering when they arrived, 2 coffees in hand. One for Elena, black with sugar, the way he'd seen her make it 100 times in his penthouse. The way he'd never noticed until now. Elena took it with trembling hands. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did. Michael was in a wheelchair, too weak to walk far, but his eyes were bright as he stared at the massive hospital complex. This is where they do the future medicine, he whispered. That's right, buddy. Adrian crouched beside the wheelchair. And you're going to be their star patient. The next 6 hours were a blur of tests. Blood work. Scans. Consultations with Dr. Mitchell and her team. Michael endured it all with quiet courage, only squeezing his mother's hand when the needles went in. Adrian watched from the corner, feeling useless and out of place. This wasn't his world. He couldn't negotiate with cancer cells or leverage his way through CT scans. All his power, his money, his influence, none of it could spare this child the pain of what came next. But it could give him a chance. Around noon, Dr. Mitchell pulled them into her office. The prelim results look good, she said, reviewing charts. Michael's strong enough to start the protocol. We'll begin day after tomorrow. Full T-cell extraction and modification, then rain fusion over 3 weeks. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. That fast. Mr. Shepard was very persuasive about expediting the timeline. Dr. Mitchell smiled slightly. And frankly, Michael doesn't have time to waste. The tumors are aggressive. Adrian's jaw clenched. What are his odds? With the trial? 60% response rate. 40% full remission. The doctor's expression sobered. Without it, Michael has maybe 3 months. Elena made a sound like she'd been punched. Adrian's hand found hers without thinking, squeezing gently. She gripped back, desperate and grateful. We'll take those odds, Adrian said firmly. That evening, Adrian did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He went shopping for toys. The FAO Schwartz clerk looked bewildered as this stone-faced billionaire in a $3,000 suit marched through the aisles, selecting telescopes and model rockets and books about space with the intensity most people reserved for hostile takeovers. It's for a friend, Adrian said when the clerk raised an eyebrow at the cart full of astronomy equipment. A friend. Was that what Michael was becoming? He delivered everything to the hospital that night. Michael's face when he saw the telescope, a real one, professional grade, the kind that could actually see Jupiter's moons, was worth every dollar. This is mine. Michael's voice was awed. To keep, Adrian confirmed. When you get better, we'll set it up on my penthouse balcony. 58 floors up. You'll see stars you've never imagined. When you get better. Not if. When. Elena pulled Adrian aside while Michael examined his treasures with shaking, excited hands. You need to stop, she whispered. Adrian frowned. Stop what? This. All of this. Her eyes were fierce. The trial, the gifts, your time. It's too much. I can't, her voice cracked. What happens when you get bored? When you remember you have a company to run and a life that doesn't include us? Michael's getting attached. I'm getting. She stopped abruptly, but Adrian heard what she didn't say. I'm getting attached too. Something shifted in his chest, warm and terrifying and unfamiliar. I'm not going anywhere, Adrian said quietly. You don't know that. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. He met her eyes. Elena, I haven't felt anything real in 20 years. I built walls so high I forgot what it was like to be human. And then I found that letter, and he exhaled slowly. You and Michael are showing me how to live again. So no, I'm not leaving.
Not now.
Not when he needs, when you both need. When we need what? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Adrian looked at Michael, then back at her. Someone who stays. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Before either could speak, Michael called out. Mama! Adrian! Look! I can see the moon through the window. They turned to find him pressed against the glass, his new telescope abandoned, pointing at the pale crescent visible in the darkening sky. Make a wish, baby, Elena said softly. Michael closed his eyes, his small face serious with concentration. Adrian found himself wishing too. Let him live.
Please.
Just let him live. It wasn't a prayer. Adrian had stopped believing in God when Lily died. But it was close. A desperate bargain with the universe. I'll be better.
I'll stay. Just don't take this child, too.
Michael opened his eyes and smiled at them both, bright and hopeful and alive. And Adrian Shepard realized with startling clarity that somewhere between firing Elena and standing in this hospital room, he'd stopped running from his past. He'd started fighting for someone else's future. If this is hitting you in the feels, let me know in the comments. The treatment started on a Wednesday. Adrian cleared his entire schedule, ignored Richard's increasingly frantic calls, let his empire run itself while he sat in a hospital room watching Michael undergo the first phase of the trial. The T-cell extraction was brutal. Michael tried to be brave, but when the machines hummed and the needles went deep, he cried. Quiet, heartbreaking sobs that made Adrian want to tear the building down with his bare hands. Elena held her son, whispering promises neither of them could guarantee. You're so strong, baby. So strong. Adrian felt useless, powerless. All his billions couldn't stop this child's suffering. When it was finally over, Michael fell into exhausted sleep, and Elena collapsed into the chair beside his bed. Go home, Adrian said gently. Rest. I'll stay with him. Elena's eyes were hollow. I can't leave him. You've been awake for 36 hours. You're no good to Michael if you collapse. Adrian pulled out his phone. My driver will take you to my penthouse. Sleep in the guest room.
Shower.
Eat something. I'll call if anything changes. Adrian. Please, Elena. Let me help. She studied him with those exhausted, too knowing eyes, then nodded slowly. After she left, Adrian sat in the dim room, watching Michael's chest rise and fall. The monitors beeped steadily. Outside the window, the city glittered, indifferent and beautiful. His phone buzzed. Sarah. Board meeting tomorrow. Critical. Need you there. Adrian silenced it. Then Michael's eyes opened. Adrian. His voice was paper-thin. I'm here, buddy. Is Mama okay?
She's resting.
You wore her out being so brave. Michael's smile was weak. I wasn't brave. I cried. Brave people cry too. That's how you know they're really fighting. Adrian moved closer. You know what takes real courage? Letting people see you're scared. Michael considered this. Are you scared? The question hit Adrian like a freight train. Was he scared? Terrified. More than he'd been since Lily's funeral. Since his wife walked out. Since he'd built his ice palace and sworn never to feel this vulnerable again. Yeah, Adrian admitted. I am. Of what? Of losing you. Of failing again. Of caring about something I can't control. Of letting down people I care about, Adrian said simply. Michael's small hand found his. You won't. You're good at keeping promises. I can tell. Adrian's throat tightened. How can you tell? Because you're still here. Michael's eyes drifted closed. Most grown-ups say they'll visit and then don't. But you came every day. That means you're the staying kind. The staying kind. Adrian sat there holding this dying child's hand, feeling something crack wide open in his chest. At 2 a.m., Adrian's phone rang. Not Sarah. Not Richard. An unknown number. Mr. Shepard? This is Jennifer Vaughn. I'm your ex-wife. Adrian's world tilted. Jennifer. He hadn't spoken her name in 15 years. I'm sorry to call so late. I heard through mutual friends that you've been spending time at Sloan Kettering, that you're helping a sick child. Her voice was cautious. Adrian, what's going on? How did you find out? Photos. Someone spotted you at the hospital. Posted on social media. It's making news. Billionaire Adrian Shepard shows rare public compassion. She paused. People are shocked. You're usually so private. Adrian closed his eyes. Of course the media found out. They always did. His name is Michael, Adrian said quietly. He's 7. Stage 4 cancer. His mother worked for me. I fired her for being late, then discovered why she was late, and his voice cracked. Jenny, I almost let another child die because I was too blind to see what was happening. Silence. Then, softly, you're thinking about Lily. Every second. Adrian stood, pacing the empty hallway. Michael's the same age she would have been when he couldn't finish. I can't save Lily, but maybe I can save him. Maybe that counts for something. Adrian. Jennifer's voice held something he hadn't heard in decades. Warmth. I'm proud of you. He nearly dropped the phone. You're finally letting yourself feel again, she continued. Finally letting people in. That's huge. I don't know what I'm doing, Adrian admitted. I just know I can't walk away. Then don't. Stay. Fight for this child. Jennifer hesitated. And Adrian? The mother. What's she like? Adrian thought of Elena, her fierce love, her exhausted strength, the way she'd never stopped fighting even when the world crushed her. She's extraordinary, he said. You care about her. It wasn't a question. Adrian leaned against the wall, the truth hitting him like lightning. Yes. God help me, I do. Good. You deserve that. After everything, you deserve to love again. Love. The word terrified him. Jenny, I can't. It's too complicated. She's vulnerable. Her son is dying. I'm just trying to help, not. Adrian. His ex-wife's laugh was gentle. You spent $3 million on a clinical trial. You abandoned your company for a week. You're sitting in a hospital at 2 a.m. That's not just helping. That's love. Whether you're ready to admit it or not. After they hung up, Adrian walked back to Michael's room. The boy was sleeping peacefully now, his small chest rising and falling. So fragile. So impossibly brave. Adrian sat down and buried his face in his hands. Jennifer was right. Somewhere between finding that letter and this moment, he'd stopped just helping. He'd started loving these people who'd shattered his carefully constructed walls. And tomorrow, when Elena returned, rested and beautiful and trusting him with her son's life, Adrian would have to face the terrifying truth that he was falling for a woman whose world was ending and a child who might not survive to see Christmas. The risk was enormous. The pain, if Michael didn't make it, would be devastating. But for the first time in 20 years, Adrian Shepard wasn't running from the possibility of loss. He was running toward the chance of something real, even if it destroyed him. The plot just thickened. Drop a comment if you saw that coming, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. The call came at 4 a.m. on the 10th day of treatment. Adrian was asleep in the chair beside Michael's bed when his phone shattered the silence. Dr. Mitchell's name flashed on the screen, and his blood turned to ice. Doctors didn't call at 4 a.m. with good news. Mr. Shepard, we have a situation. Dr. Mitchell's voice was tightly controlled. Michael's body is rejecting the modified T-cells. His fever spiked to 104. He's in respiratory distress. We've moved him to ICU. Adrian was already running. The ICU was chaos. Nurses moving with urgent precision. Machines screaming. And in the center of it all, Elena, standing frozen outside a closed door, her face drained of all color.
Elena.
She turned, and Adrian saw pure terror in her eyes. "They won't let me in," she whispered. "He's coding. They said he's coding and I can't go to him." Adrian pulled her against his chest as she shattered, her sobs violent and raw. Through the ICU window, he could see the medical team working over Michael's small body. Compressions. Intubation. Desperate. Clinical efficiency. "Please." Elena gasped against Adrian's shirt. "Please, God, not my baby. Not my baby." Adrian held her tighter, his own vision blurring. "Not again. Please, not again." The minutes stretched like hours. Elena stopped crying, gone still and silent in that terrible way that meant she was preparing for the worst. Adrian recognized it, the emotional shutdown that happened when hope became too painful to hold. Then Dr. Mitchell emerged, pulling off her mask. "He's stable," she said quickly. "But barely. The rejection-triggered cytokine storm. His immune system is attacking itself. We've got him sedated and on a ventilator." "Will he survive?" Adrian's voice was raw. Dr. Mitchell's expression was grim. "The next 48 hours are critical. If we can't get the inflammation under control," she didn't finish.
Didn't need to. Elena made a sound like dying.
"Can we see him?" Adrian asked. 5 minutes. No more. Michael looked like he was already gone. Tubes everywhere. Machines breathing for him. His small face slack and pale, all that brilliant light extinguished. Elena collapsed beside the bed, clutching his hand. "Baby, I'm here. Mama's here. You have to fight, okay? You have to keep fighting." But Michael didn't move, didn't respond. Just lay there, suspended between life and death. Adrian stood in the corner, useless and breaking. This was his fault. He'd pushed for the aggressive timeline, convinced Dr. Mitchell to expedite everything. His arrogance, his certainty that money could solve anything, had put Michael here.
Anur se took Elena's shoulder gently.
"Time's up, ma'am." "No," Elena's voice was sharp. "I'm not leaving him. Ma'am, he needs rest. You need."
"I'm not
leaving." The nurse looked at Dr. Mitchell, who nodded reluctantly. 5 more minutes. When they were alone again, Elena turned to Adrian with eyes that cut straight through him. "This is because you rushed it," she said flatly. "You pushed them to start early, to move faster than they should have." Adrian felt the words like bullets.
Elena.
He wasn't ready. His body wasn't ready. But you wanted results, wanted to fix everything with your money and your influence, and now, her voice broke. "Now my son is dying because I let you play God." Each word landed like a physical blow. "You're right," Adrian said hoarsely. "You're absolutely right. I pushed too hard. I thought," his hands clenched, "I thought I could control this. By his survival. Force the universe to cooperate because I finally cared about something." "Well, you can't." Elena's tears came again, bitter and exhausted. "You can't buy life, Adrian. You can't negotiate with death. And I was a fool to let myself believe." She stopped, pressing her fist to her mouth. "Believe what?" Adrian whispered. "That you were different. That you actually cared about us, not just your guilt. That maybe," she laughed bitterly, "that maybe we could be something. You and me. After Michael got better. That maybe I was falling for you, and it wasn't completely insane." Adrian's heart stopped. "But this was never about us," Elena continued, her voice hollow. "This was about you trying to save Lily through my son. About easing your conscience. And now Michael's paying the price for your redemption arc. That's not true, isn't it?" Elena stood, her exhaustion giving way to fury. "Be honest, Adrian. Would you be here if Michael didn't remind you of your daughter? If I wasn't a convenient vessel for your guilt?" "Yes," Adrian said fiercely.
"God, yes."
"Elena, I'm here because Michael is," he struggled for words. "Because somewhere in the last 2 weeks, you both became the most important people in my world." Words are easy when a child is dying. Then what do you want from me? Adrian's voice rose, desperate. Tell me what to do. How to fix this. You can't fix this.
Elena shouted.
Don't you understand? There's nothing you can do. No amount of money or power or influence can save him now. So just. Her voice cracked completely. Just go. Back to your empire. Your board meetings. Your life that doesn't include watching children die.
Elena.
Go. The word echoed through the ICU. Adrian stood there, bleeding from wounds he couldn't see, staring at the woman he'd fallen for and the child who might not survive the night. And for the first time since finding that letter, Adrian Shepard had no idea what to do.
He left.
Walked out of the hospital into the cold pre-dawn darkness, got in his car, and drove. Not to his penthouse. Not to his office. To the cemetery where Lily was buried. He stood before the small headstone, Lily Shepard, beloved daughter, forever 5, and let himself break completely. I failed again, he whispered to the stone. I tried to save him, and I failed. Just like I failed you. The wind offered no answers. Adrian sank to his knees in the grass, 20 years of frozen grief finally thawing, pouring out in gasping sobs that tore through him like knives. He'd been so certain, so arrogant, thought he could rewrite the ending this time. But Elena was right. He couldn't buy life, couldn't negotiate with death. All his power meant nothing against the brutal randomness of the universe. His phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Where are you? Company's falling apart. Need you now. Adrian stared at it, then turned off his phone. Let it all fall apart. His company. His reputation. Everything he'd built. None of it mattered if Michael died. None of it mattered if Elena never forgave him. The sun rose slowly, indifferent and beautiful, over a world where children died and billionaires knelt in cemeteries begging for second chances they didn't deserve. This is the breaking point. If you're still here, comment subscribe now. You need to see what happens next. Adrian stayed at Lily's grave until his phone died. Then he drove back to the hospital. He didn't care that Elena told him to leave. Didn't care that he had no right to be there. Michael was fighting for his life, and Adrian refused to abandon him, even if Elena never spoke to him again. The ICU nurse tried to stop him. Sir, family only.
I'm stay?
Adrian's voice was quiet steel. If she wants me gone, she can tell me herself. He found Elena exactly where he'd left her, beside Michael's bed, holding their son's hand, whispering prayers to a god she wasn't sure was listening. She looked up when Adrian entered. Her eyes were red, swollen, utterly exhausted. I told you to leave, she said flatly. I know. Adrian pulled up a chair on the opposite side of the bed.
I'm staying anyway. Why?
So you can watch your investment fail? The cruelty was designed to push him away. Adrian recognized it. The desperate attempt to protect herself from more pain by driving away anyone who might inflict it. He'd done the same thing for 20 years. I'm not here because of guilt, Adrian said quietly. I'm not here to fix my past or save my conscience. I'm here because... He looked at Michael's still face, then back at Elena. Because I love him. And I love you. And even if you hate me, even if Michael doesn't make it, I'm not abandoning you. Not now. Not ever. Elena's breath caught. You were right about everything, Adrian continued. I did push too hard. I did try to control things I couldn't control. I made mistakes that might cost Michael his life, and I'll carry that guilt forever. His voice cracked. But you were wrong about one thing. What? This was never about Lily. Yes, Michael reminded me what I'd lost. But what I feel for him, for you, that's not replacement love or guilt. That's real.
Raw.
Terrifying. Adrian leaned forward. Elena, I haven't felt anything this true in 20 years. And I know you're scared. I know trusting me feels impossible right now. But I'm not going anywhere. Tears streamed down Elena's face. What if he dies? What if we lose him and this, whatever this is between us, was built on hope that didn't survive? Then we grieve together. And we survive together. and we figure out what comes next together. Adrian's hand hovered over hers. But we don't do it alone. Not anymore. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then her hand moved, fingers intertwining with his across Michael's bed. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Me too." They sat like that in the dim ICU, two broken people holding onto each other while the child they both loved fought battles they couldn't see. Hour 36. Michael's fever wouldn't break. The ventilator breathed for him. His small body fought a war against itself. Elena and Adrian took shifts, one sleeping while the other kept vigil. They didn't talk much, just existed in the terrible space between hope and despair. At one point, Elena whispered, "Tell me about Lily." So Adrian did. He told her about his daughter's laugh, bright and infectious, about how she'd draw elaborate princess castles and insist they were scientifically accurate, about the morning she'd asked him to play tea party, and he'd said, "After this call," and that call had lasted all day. "I never got to play tea party," Adrian said, his voice hollow. "Never got to tell her I was sorry. She was just gone." Elena squeezed his hand. "She knew you loved her." "Did she? I was never there. Always working. Always building something more important than being her father." "Adrian, look at me." Elena's eyes were fierce. "You're here now.
You chose to stay.
That's growth. That's love. Lily would be proud of who you're becoming." The words cracked something open in Adrian's chest. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Good thing love isn't about deserving." Hour 43. Dr. Mitchell came in, her face unreadable. "The inflammation markers are dropping," she said carefully. "Not significantly, but dropping." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "What does that mean?" "It means he's fighting. The immunosuppressants are working. If we can maintain this trajectory for another 5 hours, he might." She stopped. "I don't want to promise anything, but this is the first good sign we've had." After she left, Elena turned to Adrian. "He's fighting," she repeated, wonder in her voice. "Of course he is. He's his mother's son." Adrian smiled slightly. "Stubborn.
Brave.
Impossible to defeat." "And his." Elena stopped herself. "Say it," Adrian urged gently. "And his Adrian's boy, too. The staying kind." Adrian felt something warm and terrifying bloom in his chest.
His boy.
His Elena. His family. When had that happened? When had these two people become his entire world? Hour 48. The fever broke. Michael's eyes opened, groggy, confused, but alive.
"Nana."
His voice was barely audible around the breathing tube. Elena was sobbing, laughing, pressing kisses to his forehead. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Michael's eyes found Adrian. "You stayed." "I told you I would." "The staying kind," Michael whispered, then smiled weakly before his eyes drifted closed again. But this sleep was different. Natural. Healing. Dr. Mitchell confirmed it an hour later. "The cytokine storm is subsiding. We'll keep him sedated another day, but he's going to make it through this." Elena collapsed into Adrian's arms, and they held each other while the weight of 48 hours of terror finally lifted. "Thank you," Elena whispered against his chest. "For staying. For not giving up on him. On us." "Never," Adrian promised. "I'm done running, Elena."
From you.
From feeling. From life. He pulled back to look at her. "When Michael gets better, and he will, I want us to figure out what this is. What we could be." Elena's smile was tentative, fragile, but real. "Yeah."
Yeah.
She kissed him then, soft and desperate and full of hope that had almost died but somehow survived. When they pulled apart, Michael was watching them with barely open eyes. "About time," he mumbled. And despite everything, the fear, the pain, the near loss, they laughed. Because sometimes, in the darkest hours, love finds a way. The light's breaking through. If this got you, drop a comment. And if you're not subscribed, you're missing out. 3 weeks later, Michael was strong enough to leave the ICU. The modified T-cells had worked. Against all odds, his body had accepted them after the initial crisis, and now they were hunting down cancer cells with ruthless efficiency. The tumors were shrinking. Slowly, but measurably. Dr. Mitchell called it miraculous. Elena called it answered prayers. Adrian just called it Michael being Michael, too stubborn to quit, too brave to surrender. But the battle wasn't over. On a cold November morning, Dr. Mitchell summoned them to her office with an expression Adrian had learned to dread. "The trial is working," she began carefully. "But we've hit a complication." Elena's hand found Adrian's instantly. "What kind of complication?" "The cancer is responding to treatment, but Michael's bone marrow damage is more extensive than we initially thought. He's going to need a transplant soon, or the remission won't hold." Dr. Mitchell pulled up scans. "We've searched the National Registry. No matches." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "What are his options?" Adrian asked, his mind already racing through possibilities. "Family donors are the best bet. Elena, we've already tested you. You're only a partial match." "Not enough." Dr. Mitchell's gaze shifted. "Do you have other family? Michael's father?" Elena's face went pale. "He's not in the picture. Never has been." "Siblings? Parents?" "My parents died years ago. I'm an only child." Elena's voice cracked. "There's no one." Adrian watched her crumble, watched hope drain from her eyes, and felt rage building in his chest.
No.
They hadn't come this far to lose Michael now. "Test me," Adrian said abruptly. Both women stared at him.
"What?" Elena whispered.
"Test me. I'll donate if I'm a match." Dr. Mitchell shook her head. "Mr. Shepard, bone marrow donation requires genetic compatibility. Unless you're blood-related." "Test me anyway." Adrian's voice was steel. "I don't care about the odds. Test me." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Adrian, you can't. The chances are 1 in a million. Then we test 1,000,000 people." Adrian pulled out his phone, already texting his assistant. "I want a donor drive organized.
Today.
I'll fund it completely. We'll test every person in New York City if we have to." "Adrian." "Elena, I'm not losing him. I'm not losing either of you." His jaw clenched. "We find a match. Whatever it takes." The donor drive went viral. Within 48 hours, Adrian had mobilized an army. Testing centers in every borough. Social media campaigns.
Celebrity endorsements.
The story of the billionaire fighting to save his Maid's son captured hearts across the nation. 10,000 people registered the first day. Adrian got tested first, knowing the odds were astronomical. When the results came back negative, Elena held him while he fought not to show his devastation. "We'll find someone," she promised. 20,000 tests. 30,000. Headlines everywhere. Billionaire's desperate search for miracle match. But no matches. Not even close. Michael grew weaker. The remission was fragile, temporary without the transplant. Time was running out. Adrian barely slept. Spent every waking moment coordinating the search, pulling strings, calling in every favor he'd accumulated in 20 years of ruthless business. On day 7, Richard Corleone appeared at the hospital. "You need to come back," his CFO said bluntly. "The board is talking coup. Investors are nervous. The company's hemorrhaging value." Adrian didn't look up from his laptop, where he was reviewing test results. "Let it burn." "Adrian." "I said let it burn, Richard. The company, my reputation, everything. None of it matters if Michael dies. You're destroying everything you built." "No," Adrian finally met his eyes. "I'm finally building something that matters. And if you can't understand that, get out." Richard stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, "Test me." Adrian blinked.
"What?"
"For the donor match.
"Test me."
Richard's expression was uncomfortable. "Look, you're being an idiot about the company. But that kid." He glanced toward Michael's room. "He deserves a chance. So test me." Something warm flickered in Adrian's chest. "Richard. Don't make it weird. Just tell me where to go." He wasn't a match either. But that afternoon, 40 executives from Shepard Tech showed up to be tested. Then employees. Then competitors. Then people who'd never met Adrian but were moved by a 7-year-old who wanted to be an astronaut. 60,000 tests. Still nothing. Elena found Adrian on the hospital roof at midnight, staring at the stars. "You should sleep," she said softly, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "Can't." Another batch of results comes in at 6 a.m. "Adrian, you've done everything possible. More than anyone could ask. It's not enough."
His voice was raw.
"I promised him, Elena. I promised we'd beat this. That I'd stay and fight, and he broke. I can't lose him. I can't lose you both." Elena turned him to face her. "You haven't lost us. Whatever happens, you gave us more time, more hope, more love than I ever dreamed possible." "It's not enough," Adrian repeated desperately. "It's everything." Elena cupped his face. "Adrian Shepard, you changed our lives. You showed a dying child what it means to be fought for. You showed me what real love looks like." Tears streamed down her face. "If Michael doesn't make it, and God, I pray he does, but if he doesn't, at least he got to know you. At least we got this."
"Elena."
She kissed him, fierce and desperate, pouring everything unsaid into that moment. When they broke apart, Adrian's phone rang. Dr. Mitchell. At midnight. His hands shook as he answered. "Tell me." "We found a match." Dr. Mitchell's voice trembled with emotion. "Test number 67,432. A college student in Brooklyn. 10-point match. Perfect compatibility." Adrian's knees buckled. Elena caught him, both of them sinking to the rooftop, clutching each other while the news sank in. "When?" Adrian managed. "She's already here, ready to donate. We can do the transplant tomorrow morning."
"Tomorrow."
Michael would have his chance. Adrian looked at Elena, at her tear-streaked face, her trembling smile, the hope blazing back to life in her eyes. "He's going to make it," Adrian whispered. "He's going to make it," Elena repeated, laughing and crying at once. They held each other under the stars while the city glittered below, two broken people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and fought their way back to light. And somewhere in the hospital beneath them, a 7-year-old boy dreamed of Mars. Almost there. Comment if you're crying. Subscribe if you need to see how this story ends. 6 months later, Adrian stood on his penthouse balcony, 58 floors above Manhattan, adjusting the professional-grade telescope while Michael bounced excitedly beside him. "Can we see Jupiter tonight?" Michael asked, his voice strong now, healthy. His hair had grown back in dark curls that Elena loved to ruffle. The hollows under his eyes were gone, replaced by the bright energy of an 8-year-old who'd been given a second chance at life. "Jupiter and 4 of its moons," Adrian confirmed, smiling. "Plus Saturn if we're lucky." Saturn. Michael pressed his eye to the lens, gasping at the sight. "I can see the rings. Adrian, I can actually see the rings." Elena emerged from inside carrying hot chocolate, and Adrian's breath caught the way it always did when he saw her. She'd moved into the penthouse 3 months ago, initially protesting that it was too much, too fast. But Adrian had learned something crucial. Life was too short to waste on hesitation. "See anything good?" Elena asked, handing Michael his mug. "Everything. The rings are so clear, and oh, is that one of Jupiter's moons?" Michael looked up at Adrian with shining eyes. "This is the best telescope in the universe." "Second best," Adrian corrected gently. "The best one is the James Webb. But when you're old enough to join NASA, you'll get to use that one." "When I join NASA," Michael repeated firmly. "Not if."
"When?"
Dr. Mitchell's last scan had shown complete remission. The transplant had worked perfectly. Michael's donor, a 22-year-old art student named Claire, had visited twice, forming an unlikely friendship with the boy she'd saved. "Bedtime in 20 minutes, Elena warned. Michael groaned, but didn't argue. The compromises of health, early bedtimes, careful monitoring, regular checkups, were small prices for being alive. After Michael went inside to finish his hot chocolate, Elena moved into Adrian's arms. "Hard to believe 6 months ago we were," she stopped, not needing to finish. "I know." Adrian kissed her forehead. "Sometimes I wake up terrified it's all a dream. It's real." Elena looked up at him. We're real. Michael's healthy. You're here. This is our life now. Our life. The words still sent warmth through Adrian's chest. His company had survived his absence, barely. Richard had held things together while Adrian restructured his priorities. He still worked, still led, but differently now. Remotely when possible. Delegating more. Actually leaving the office at reasonable hours. Because he had people waiting for him at home. I have something for you, Adrian said suddenly. Elena raised an eyebrow. Another gift? Adrian, you have to stop. This one's different. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Elena's breath caught. I know it's only been 6 months, Adrian said, his voice unsteady in a way billion-dollar negotiations never made him. I know we've been through trauma and crisis, and maybe we should wait. Be practical. Adrian. But I wasted 20 years being practical, being careful, keeping everyone at arm's length. He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring. Elena Rigby, you shattered every wall I built. You and Michael showed me what it means to really live, to fight for something beyond money and power and control. Tears streamed down Elena's face. I love you, Adrian continued. I love your son. I love the life we're building together. And I don't want to waste another second pretending I'm not completely, terrifyingly in love with you. He took a shaky breath. Will you marry me? Yes. Elena was laughing and crying at once. Yes, you ridiculous, wonderful man. Yes. Adrian slipped the ring on her finger with trembling hands, then kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning for decades. When they broke apart, Michael was watching from the doorway, grinning. Finally, he said, echoing his words from the ICU. I was wondering when you'd ask. They laughed, and Michael ran over, and Adrian pulled them both into his arms. This instant family that had formed from tragedy and transformed into joy. Does this mean Adrian's going to be my dad? Michael asked. Adrian's throat tightened. If you want me to be. Michael pretended to consider it seriously. Will you help me with my science projects? Every single one. And take me to the planetarium? Monthly. And teach me about business, so I can start my own space company? Adrian laughed. Absolutely. Then yeah. Michael hugged him tight. I want you to be my dad. 1 year later, Adrian stood in a small chapel, watching Elena walk down the aisle in a simple white dress that took his breath away. Michael was his best man, standing tall in a suit that matched Adrian's, his face bright with health and happiness. The ceremony was intimate, just close friends, and the people who'd fought alongside them. Dr. Mitchell, Richard, Claire, the donor who'd saved Michael's life, Jennifer, his ex-wife, who'd flown in to witness Adrian's second chance at happiness. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Adrian pulled Elena close and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." "Thank you for staying," she whispered back. Their kiss was met with applause and Michael's loud, "Finally." At the reception, Michael gave a speech that made everyone cry. "My mom always told me that family isn't just blood," he said, reading carefully from note cards. "It's the people who show up, who fight for you, who stay even when things are scary." He looked at Adrian. "A year ago, I was really sick. I thought I might die. But then Adrian found my mom's letter, and everything changed." Michael's voice strengthened. "He didn't have to help us. We were strangers. But he stayed anyway. And now I have a dad who teaches me about stars and business and how to be brave. So this toast is to Adrian," he raised his apple cider, "for being the staying kind." Adrian couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. That night, after the celebration ended, the three of them returned to the penthouse. Michael fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from dancing. Adrian and Elena tucked him in together, watching him sleep peacefully, this miracle child who'd survived the impossible. "I keep thinking about that morning," Elena whispered. "When you fired me. If I hadn't dropped that letter, I would have found another way to you," Adrian said with certainty. "Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe the path would have been different. But I believe we were meant to find each other."
Elena smiled.
The cold billionaire believes in fate now. The cold billionaire believes in love, Adrian corrected. Because of you. Because of him. He pulled her close. You saved me, Elena. Just as much as I saved Michael. We saved each other, she said simply. They stood in the doorway, watching their son breathe easily, watching his chest rise and fall with the steady rhythm of life and health and futures full of possibility. Outside, the city glittered. Inside, a family, built from broken pieces, forged in fire, and held together by love, began the rest of their lives. Adrian Shepard had spent 20 years building an empire. But his greatest achievement was learning that the real wealth wasn't in boardrooms or bank accounts. It was here, in this moment, in these people, in choosing to stay when staying was hardest, in finding the courage to love again, in discovering that sometimes the letters we almost miss are the ones that change everything. If this story touched you, drop a comment and tell me about your own second chances. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because every week, I bring you stories that remind us what it means to be human. Thank you for being here.
For staying until the end.
For believing in redemption, love, and the power of showing up. Until the next story, keep fighting for what matters. Keep loving fiercely. Keep being the staying kind.